All right. Welcome to Drink Pink in honor of October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We're here tonight to celebrate and share two really great wines. One is our California Chardonnay and also our Carneros Reserve Chardonnay. And this is just one of my favorite wines. If I haven't met you, my name's Mari. I am the director of wine at One Hope, and I'm passionate about getting back here to this place with all of you, which is a really fun, informational tasting where we talk about everything from grape to glass. And I try and do it quickly, but it almost always goes the full hour. So hold on tight. And I also wanted to share that if you'd like to chat or you have some questions, go ahead and chat away in the chat box and ask any questions. And when I come to a pause, I will be able to answer your questions. So go ahead and chat as we go. This is interactive. I want to hear from you guys, and I want you to learn as much as possible tonight. So we're talking about October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and there's so many great fundraisers going on right now. In fact, I went to one the other day, and it was super inspiring, and I was just overwhelmed with the just passion for women supporting other women. And, you know, we all know this statistic. Whenever somebody says 1 in 8, we know immediately what it is, right? We know that 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in her lifetime. And this really kind of brings us all together, men and women together, to support women who might be going through this. And with our California Chardonnay, we are able to provide clinical trials for breast cancer. So that's just one thing that we can do together this month. So I'm excited about that. And, you know, I was looking actually for a quote, you know, about supporting these women and supporting this cause, really. And there was this classic quote that came to me that I always see, and it's changed a little bit. So it always starts out with, behind every successful woman is a, and then you fill in the blank, right? But tonight I thought, for the quote of this evening, behind every successful woman is a tribe of people who have her back. And so that's us tonight. We're here learning more about these wines and how we can get back and support women who need it. So let's talk about the grape. We're gonna start with Chardonnay. And this is a classic French grape varietal that hails from the world famous region of Burgundy. If anybody's ever asked you at a restaurant, do you like white Burgundy? And you go, I don't know what that is. Is that a blend? Back in the day, maybe 30 years ago or 35 years ago, in the United States, there was a wine labeled white Burgundy. And what did that mean? Well, white Burgundy is Chardonnay. And we know from a wine tasting that we did earlier this summer that red Burgundy is Pinot Noir. So Chardonnay and Pinot Noir go together. They grow in cool climates, in cool regions, especially, you know, most notably from the Burgundy region of France. But here also we grow Chardonnay throughout the state. And then we're gonna hone in on the appellation of Carneros tonight with our Reserve Chardonnay. So this is a really special grape. It's received so much critical acclaim over the years, and certainly along with its sidekick Cabernet, sort of as the king, Chardonnay would be the queen of wine grapes. It's one of the most popular wines in America and around the world. People love Chardonnay. And we also know, as we're trying to talk about these wines and tastings, that there's a wide variety of styles of Chardonnay, right? So we can go from very austere stainless steel fermented Chardonnay with a ton of racy minerality and lemon and high acid, to something that's very fat and full and buttery and just plump and robust. And somewhere in the middle of those two are most of the wines that we see labeled as Chardonnay from the Chardonnay grapes. And that all depends a little bit, of course, on the region. But Chardonnay will grow in a lot of places around the world, and most notably for those cool climates like our Carneros Chardonnay. So I'm going to take you over to white winemaking. This is where it gets fun. We talked a little bit about white winemaking when we talked about Sauvignon Blanc in August. And if you haven't seen that, you can go back on VAU and revisit. But basically, here what we do in white winemaking when we're talking about Chardonnay is we press the grapes. In high quality Chardonnay, we like to press the grapes whole cluster. So that means we don't take them off of the stem, what we also term as the rachis. We don't take them off that and then press them, even though that is done. But in high quality, we want to crush them and press them all together. It's more gentle, and it's a process that allows the release of all this beautiful juice and flavor, but not the tannins in the skins. In white wine, we don't want those tannins in the skins. We want a really smooth, silky finish. So then we take that juice and we can ferment it a couple different ways. We can ferment it in oak barrels, which is very traditional for Chardonnay, or we can ferment it in stainless steel. We can actually even ferment it in stainless steel barrels if we want to. And our wines are made in a couple of different ways, so it's going to be fun to talk about the differences in our California Chardonnay and our Reserve Carneros. Then we can either ferment in barrel and age in barrel, or we can ferment in stainless and age in barrel. So there's another option. So I'll just point out here that our California Chardonnay is fermented in stainless and aged in oak, French and American oak, where our Reserve Carnero Chardonnay is fermented in barrel and aged in barrel, okay? We'll talk a little bit about what that does too. And then after we've aged for enough time in barrel, the wine is then blended and bottled. These wines result in a richness and complexity that is not found in stainless steel alone. We get this complexity of flavor from the barrel, and we get a richness from the lees. Now, this is one of our keywords tonight is lees. And we've talked a little bit about it throughout some of our Q&As this year and also a little bit in these wine tastings. But lees are the yeast sediments. After they do their job, they're just skeletons. There's nothing left of them. So after the yeast take the sugar and convert it to alcohol, they're left as the skeleton. But their job isn't over completely because they are now part of an amazing contribution to mouthfeel and creaminess. And so when you have the barrel there and you're laying it flat on its side, so this barrel you see in the picture, when you're aging, it's going to be on its side. That's how you see a lot of these barrels when you look at wineries or photos in wineries. And they're laying on its side, and on the bottom there is all the lees. So all the sediment from the fermentation comes down to the bottom of the barrel. And that exposure to those proteins, which are now proteins, is what allows you to create volume and creaminess and richness in Chardonnay. So barrel fermentations are very time intensive. Each barrel of about 60 gallons of wine needs to be stirred. It needs to be topped up. It needs to be adjusted. We do a lot of things to the barrels, but most notably the stirring of the lees and getting the wine in contact with that creamy, yummy sediment on the bottom, which we call lees. When we're aging on the lees for an extended period of time, that's called sur lees or on the lees. It's a French term that's on the lees. Looks like I've got a couple questions here in the chat box, so let me grab those if I can. How do you spell lees? It's L-E-E-S. Hi, Gina. And how long is our California Chardonnay aged in the barrel? Great question. We are aging both our California Chardonnay and also our Reserve Chardonnay in oak for approximately 8 to 10 months. So about 8 to 10 months that we're aging these wines. And that seems to be a really good amount of time for Chardonnay, for most Chardonnay production, because you allow it to get creamy, but you keep the fruit freshness. If you're making a really big Chardonnay, giant Chardonnay with, just a lot of fruit, a lot of malolactic, which we're going to talk about in a second, then you might want to over vintage and keep the wine in barrel longer. But in order to preserve some of the freshness, which is really one of the pinnacles of our wine portfolio, is fresh, bright, floral, aromatic wines, we like about 8 to 10 months in barrel. So one more question here is the fermentation that makes the core Chardonnay taste fruitier than a butter Chardonnay. Yes, in some ways it's the fermentation process in our core Chardonnay that is in stainless steel. It's a cool fermentation that allows for aromatic wines, and that's partly what contributes to that tropical, really aromatic component. And then we also have the oak that jumps out at us, right? A lot of really pretty vanilla and other characters. So it's the combination of those two why making stylistic decisions that make this wine super unique. And I know you guys have heard that before. And then with our reserve Chardonnay, we're going straight to barrel, and it's fermented in the barrel. So it gets a lot of creaminess, a lot of richness. It picks up that barrel. It's allowed to be in barrel longer, to be more integrated, and just really super beautiful. So we're going to go into a couple more things here. So one process that's not outlined here, but I want to talk about because it's going to come up in our descriptors here. And I'll just jump over, well, no, I'll keep you on here for this, is malolactic. So everybody wants to know, where does the butter come from? What are you talking about with butter? Does anybody raise your hand if you want to know about butter in Chardonnay? I got to scroll through and see all these hands. Anybody? Okay. Oh, Gina is having a big party. She's got 2 hands up. Awesome. There's Alyssa. Hi. Hey, everybody. Oh, wow. There's all kinds of good faces on here. All right, guys. Well, let's talk about butter. And I want to get to the bottom of this butter subject with you guys because it's important to understand. So, super easy to understand. Let me spell it out in a couple steps. Number 1, a bacteria, a food grade bacteria. Okay, you don't have to be worried about this bacteria. A food grade bacteria, same that's used in all kinds of different fermentation products, including cheeses and whatnot. Food grade bacteria, okay, is introduced to the barrel. It's purified. It's this pure form, and it's not gross at all. It's just this little dried form. It's introduced into wine, okay? So when wine is complete and finished fermenting, this bacteria is introduced if the winemaker wants to add malolactic. Its single job is to eat acid. That's what it does, okay? In a nutshell, it eats acid. So it takes one type of acid and converts it to another type of acid, which actually lowers the acidity in the wine and makes it much more palatable and plush and round. Did you know that almost every single red wine goes through malolactic fermentation? But we don't talk about that, do we? Because we don't have that buttery component. It doesn't stand out because a red is so complex. There's so much going on with the wine that buttery component doesn't come to the forefront. But every red wine undergoes malolactic, or almost every red wine undergoes malolactic fermentation. So it's important because what it does to our sensory perception of the wine is it makes this smooth character. It softens those edges. It rounds things out because we've literally eaten acid, taken it away. So we took that lemon and we converted it to milk, okay? That's kind of what we do. So that's what malolactic does. And this guy has got this big job. He eats acid. When he eats acid, there is actually one byproduct, and it's called diacetyl. And you don't have to know that term, but just know that diacetyl is what makes butter-flavored popcorn. So when you go to the movies and I've got to put the butter on my popcorn, but it's not real butter, well then what is it? It's oil with diacetyl. It's a food grade product. It's deliciously butterful, but it's not exactly butter, okay? So that happens, and that's what butter diacetyl is used, and it's also used for your butter flavored popcorn jelly beans, okay? Everybody had one of those and gone, oh my gosh, this tastes like butter. Well, they're just using diacetyl. And diacetyl, of course, is a byproduct of that malolactic fermentation. It's a secondary type of fermentation. So it's kind of fun because as we are talking about winemaking and you guys are learning more and more about the winemaking process and why different wines taste different, we've talked a lot about different byproducts that result from fermentation. And does anybody know one byproduct from fermentation that occurs in sparkling wine? If you do, put it in the chat box because it's really fun to talk about these. We're actually using one process of fermentation and then we use that byproduct to our advantage. That's tricky winemaking, right? Yay, Gina's right, it's bubbles. CO2, perfect, you guys, you're learning so much. So this process actually has an outcome that's really positive. And in Chardonnay, we've got diacetyl, and that, my friends, is what makes butter in Chardonnay. Now, every winemaker has a different way that they make their white wines. So you may find that you have tried a Viognier that's undergone malolactic fermentation, or a Pinot Blanc that went through malolactic fermentation. And that's all possible, and maybe they don't taste like butter because winemakers can make decisions throughout the process to sort of inhibit the amount of butter in the overall wine. So we're not going to go into that. We're just going to talk about butter and how to get more butter, and do our wines have a lot of butter, and why would they and why would they not? So when we're talking about our California Chardonnay, you know, this wine does not undergo the malolactic fermentation. So it's a stainless steel fermenter, and then we have the aging in oak, okay? Beautiful, beautiful wine because it's so floral. The wine is grown throughout California. It doesn't have that high acidity, so we don't need to eat acid. We don't need to put our little special, what would I call him? Like ninja, the acid ninja. We don't need to put him in there to do a job because we already have this really big, beautiful, tropical, aromatic, and soft wine to work with. So super lucky for that. But we go somewhere like Carneros, which is the coolest region in Napa Valley. It's in the southernmost region right next to the San Francisco Bay. And there, when our grapes are ripe and we have enough sugar and our flavors have developed, we have a lot of acid. And that acid could be overwhelming to most of us. It's really intense. And so for that reason, we will introduce malolactic. Now, many winemakers feel that malolactic will enhance the complexity of the wine. So it does have some other contributions to the wine. There's added complexity to the wine. There's that richness that occurs, and there's diacetyl. And the way that we manage the diacetyl, we can create a really buttery wine or not as buttery. Both of them can go through malolactic. So that is the word on butter. Any questions about butter? Because I want to make sure you guys are super informed on that because I know it's a question that you get a lot. All right, well, we will go to our flavor descriptors and we will open some of our wines. Hey, Jake. Maybe Jake has a question. We'll see. Okay. What would I say the most buttery wine in our portfolio is? Ooh, that's a good question. I think in general in our portfolio, we have a lot of fruit forward wines, a lot of freshness, and I don't find that any of them are overly buttery. We're going to taste the Carnero Chard tonight, and even though it's a little bit more similar to the Burgundy style, it does go through malolactic, and we should be able to see some of those malolactic contributions. But it's tough for me right now, I'll think on that one, to say the most buttery wine in our portfolio.
I right now think it's the Joseph Jewell.
Joseph Jewell, there you go. I forgot about that one for a hot second. You're right.
It's not super buttery, but it's but it's got more relative than the others. And I agree with you. Our Carnero is definitely more than most of the shards, and then our California shard, much more tropical for me. So I'm with you, but it was a little bit of a trick because that any of ours, I would never throw any of ours in the super buttery bucket and make it the primary indicator of the kind of identity of wine for our whites.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that Joseph Jewell is a great example of that type of wine that goes and fermented in barrel. It's got a lot of richness. It's from the region of Russian River where there's a lot of really rich Chardonnays. It's big. It's a giant complex mouthfeel. And that certainly has gone through malolactic. So that's a really good example of some butter and some full-bodied. So malolactic also produces sort of a full body, and it's in that richness and complexity along with aging on the lees that you get this full bodied. So you can have a full bodied Chardonnay, and the Joseph Jewell is right in there as one of those more full bodied wines. So good call there, Jake. He always has the good calls, right? Like saves the day with like, oh, what about Joseph Jewell, huh? Totally. I'm glad to see you on here tonight, Jake. That's fun. So anyway, we're going to... I know. Yeah. It's
I am too. I think I can't verify it, but I think we had the last fire go from red to orange and yellow on the radar. So I'm going to go down and check that out. But that...
Great.
I was like, you know what? I'm cracking a bottle of wine. And I was like, I'm going to crack a bottle of wine and drink some wine. Mark, at your house right now too.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this is spectacular. What a fun tasting. Thanks for joining, Jake. Jake's usually super busy, but this week he just happens to be in Napa fighting fires at the estate. And we're super grateful that he hasn't slept a single wink all week, just protecting the estate, and all the work that they've put into the house is just incredible. So great to have Jake here. That's awesome. And so let's open some of these wines. I know some of you are getting thirsty. I know that I am. Now that Jake said that the flags went from red to orange and yellow, I'm like really thirsty. So anyway, we're talking about opening our wines, and I've got a wine opener here. And each one of these tastings, we like to kind of go back to the basics, because some of you might be new and some of you might just be struggling with like, I want to open a bottle of wine like a pro. So let's start to do that. So I've got an opener here that's very similar to our One Hope openers, where we actually have the knife, the corkscrew, and this little fulcrum piece right here. So I like to take the knife, and if you guys can see, I just go right underneath this little lip at the top of the bottle. And I use that to kind of brace on the bottle and get a good clean cut with my knife. And it just stays right there, and I pull it up, and voila, it's super clean. Now, I also like to say that if it doesn't go well, if it doesn't go that well, which that's happened to me, just pull the foil off. You don't have to have a super messy table and be embarrassed about it for the whole night, because I've done that too before, where totally messed up my foil, and then I'm just like sweating it the whole time. I'm like, why didn't I just pull that foil off? And then I would have had a really fun time and been able to talk to people and not been, worried about it. So you've got your good clean foil, and then you've got your corkscrew itself. And if you notice, if you take a look at a corkscrew, you'll see that it kind of goes off to the side here. Can you see that? Kind of goes off to the side. It doesn't come straight out. And that's important, because you can't just really stick this thing straight in when it's not pointed straight down. It doesn't work very well. So I like to take my bottle by the horns. Take your bottle by the neck here, and use your corkscrew and place that pointed edge right in the center of your cork. Okay, so it's right in the center of your cork. It's worth spending the extra couple seconds to do this, because then you're not going to have a cork where your corkscrew goes sideways and it cracks and it breaks and you've got all those issues, and it's just a big mess and it's embarrassing, and you just want to get your tasting going. So let's try that. So we use our pointed edge, and then once we kind of get it in there and get one turn on the corkscrew, then we can go straight up. And now we've got really good firm hold on this cork, and we can go ahead and use our little fulcrum arm here to lift it up once and then lift it up twice. And then voila. What does the cork say today? Wine is bottled poetry. Oh yeah, I like that. Wine is bottled poetry, and I need some poetry today, right? So now we've got our California Core Chardonnay open, and I'm gonna pour it into a glass. What glass do you wanna use for Chardonnay? This is always a question that comes up. What's Jake using? Paper cup?
You're making me laugh, Mari. Wine is bottled poetry, and I need some poetry in my life.
I do. Who doesn't today?
I'm using
like a little, gentle reminder that everything's gonna be okay. So here we are.
This is the glass I'm using.
Oh, that's a nice glass.
It's
okay,
nice.
Everybody, let me see your swirl here tonight. I want to see what you're using to swirl. There's no right or wrong answer. If you remember, last month I was using my tumbler. It was my stemless tumbler for our fall reds. And that's because I actually kind of wanted to warm that wine up and pull the aromatics up and just get those kind of cozy vibes with my wine. But with our Chardonnay, I'm using the stem for its real purpose, which is to keep the temperature of the wine as it's intended. So that's all the good technical stuff of why we have a stem and why it's there. And so if you have a stem, you might as well hold the stem. I prefer pinky out, if you really want to do that. No, I'm kidding. Don't worry, guys. But you can go ahead and hold your stem instead of your glass so that you can keep the glass the right temperature. If you want to warm the wine up a little bit, if it's a little too chilly, then go ahead and grab the glass too. Anyway, you guys know that there is no right or wrong. That's just sort of the technical how-to. And I have often been found drinking Chardonnay out of stemless glassware, out of little Italian cups, out of plastic cups. Whatever is going to work is going to work. But this is technically, a Chardonnay glass. It's shaped the way that it is for best enjoyment of Chardonnay. And I can keep the temperature right. And I'm glad I'm doing that because these aren't super chilled and I don't want to warm them up anymore tonight. Oh, Jake's killing me. This is fun. Oh, this is fun to have Jake here. Jake, you're invited. Next month, I'm going to tell you what we're going to taste. It's going to be a lot of fun too. So anyway, then we want to swirl. Okay, this is something we love to do. You guys have been swirling. And why are we swirling? We're swirling the wine so that we can lift the aromatics up into the glass so our nose can reach them. Okay, so we're swirling here. Everybody's getting their swirl on, and then we're going to go ahead and smell it. Wow, super perfumed. That's crazy. Why we want to smell it is because most of our tasting sensations come from our sense of smell. It's about 99% comes from our sense of smell. So everything that we're picking up in this wine is eventually going to go through our olfactory system in that sense of smell. And so it's really important to go, wow, what does this smell like? What do I like? To me, this is super tropical right now. It's super beautiful and aromatic. Somebody has some warm Chardonnay. Uh-oh. I hope you're not warming that one up, Lori. So you're going to go ahead and smell. I think this is a beautiful wine. I pick up a lot of those vanilla notes and a lot of the notes from the combination of French and American oak. So a little bit of coconut in here, a little bit of banana and pineapple. It's actually got a little floral note to it. And I am drinking the new 2016 Chardonnay, everybody. So I just wanted to let you know this is the new vintage of Chardonnay. Now let's go ahead and sip this wine. I see your faces. Duh, Mari, we already did like a half an hour ago. We've been sipping this for half an hour while you've been talking. So when I sip this wine, then I start to be able to notice the things that I can actually taste, which are sweet and sour, saltiness and bitterness. This wine is really delicate and beautiful on entry. I don't have any bitterness. We don't have salt in wine, so that's good. But I like to pair it with salty foods. And it's really rich and viscous in my mouth, so it lingers sort of along my palate. That's something that I find that I really like. Now, what about our pairing tonight? Hi, Megan. What about our popcorn pairing? So tonight's popcorn pairing is caramel corn. And every month we do our popcorn pairing. A lot of them are popcorns that you can make and do yourself. But tonight we've got caramel corn, and I'll admit that it was store-bought. I bought the caramel corn, okay? Too much going on, bought the caramel corn. But what I like to do when I'm pairing wine with different snacks, and popcorn is perfect for a lot of your hosting tastings, it's really inexpensive and a fun way to add flavor to food and just have a little substance there. So yeah, Tracy says that there is caramel corn in the gift sets. I know, I tried to get some of that. It's really good. And so I'm gonna go ahead and smell my wine and taste my wine. Then I'm going to have a bite of my caramel corn and then try the wine again. Okay, so you guys can do that with me with whatever you're pairing tonight. A little caramel corn. Wow. Super sweet and buttery, and it's also, I should say, sea salt caramel corn. It's really yummy. When I go back to the wine, do you know what pops is the apple and pear? When I first was tasting this wine, I didn't get all that apple and pear. I was getting that coconut and that richness from the barrel. And I was getting all these flavors, but the apple and pear weren't really popping out. When I tasted the caramel corn that has more of those kind of rich flavors, then the apple and pear just popped out. So now I'm going from sort of a complex wine to something that's really intensely fruit and really beautiful apple and pear. So it's really fun when you're pairing wine and food to see how the wine changes. And ideally, the best food and wine pairing has the food tasting great and the wine tasting great too. And at least changing so that you notice new things about the wine. So now I am not going to be able to drink this whole bottle of Chardonnay tonight. So what am I going to do? How long will this last? So I recommend for all of our whites about 2 days if you don't do anything to the bottle except just re-enter the cork. So if you've just got the cork in here, I'd go back to this in a couple of days. But if you want to take this to a tasting in about 4 days or 5 days, then you probably want to invest in some kind of preservation. And I like the little private preserve gas bottles that you can get. You can also use a vacuum. You know, maybe you guys already have some of your own ways to preserve bottles so that you can go from one tasting to the other, or use, you know, a bottle that you open tonight for something special this weekend or a tasting. So if you want to do that, go ahead and invest in something. But 2 days just with the cork is what I recommend for all of our whites. And of course, that's longer for our reds and even longer for our reserve reds. All right. So beautiful California Chardonnay, very tropical. There's no malolactic there. It's aged in French and American oak, and it was stainless steel fermented. So you can see how all of those winemaking decisions from our winemaking tab on the previous slide really created that type of style. And hopefully you'll be able to describe this wine better when you're at your next tasting. Now we're gonna go ahead and sip our reserve Chardonnay from Carneros. This is also the new vintage, the 2015. Now, I know that this is a lot of people's favorite, and I will just give you kind of a live update. I drove by this vineyard. Did you guys see me at the vineyard earlier this year when I was on Facebook? I think I took you to the Chardonnay vineyard. Anyway, it's in Carneros. It's this beautiful vineyard on a hilltop. It gets a lot of cool breezes, very, very cool area. And actually, this entire area around the vineyard, but not including the vineyard, burnt. So Jake, if you know where Stornetta's Dairy is, it's right behind Stornetta's Dairy, right there. So it was really sad to see this old dairy today, and it's just all burned, but the vineyards tend to do pretty well throughout these fires. And the vines looked pretty good. So that's a good sign. I also tasted this wine today in barrel. So it just finished fermentation, and we'll start looking at malolactic pretty soon. So let's go ahead and swirl this wine. And let's compare it a little bit to the California Chardonnay so that we can kind of talk about some of these attributes that each one has and why they're different and what makes a reserve something different from our core collection. Now, we have gone into a special appellation inside California. California is a large state that goes vertically north and south. There's a lot of different microclimates. And when we start selecting wines for our reserve collection, we go to the heart of the very best appellations for that grape. And in the case of the Chardonnay, Carneros is a classic. It's a beautiful, beautiful place that has a similar climate to Burgundy in some ways, in terms of being very cool. There's a Mediterranean influence. It's got that wind and ocean breeze constantly going through the vines. And I think you guys saw that on Facebook a little bit this year. So we've gone to this special piece of the world that's geographically defined as an area called Carneros. And you guys know about that because we've been talking a lot about different appellations as we've been going through these tasting series. But this really, I can smell a little bit of the butter. Can anybody smell a little bit of the butter in this wine compared to, just a little, not a lot, it's not over the top, it's not even anything I think you would really notice if you were just tasting this wine. But compared to our California core Chardonnay, it's got that little bit of creaminess, brioche, kind of from the lees, and then just a little bit of butteriness. So then we can go ahead, ooh, and lemon. Beautiful, beautiful, pure lemon. That's a classic character in Carneros, is this lemon meringue, lemon cream pie, sort of this high note of fruit purity from really quality vineyards in Carneros. And remember, this was direct to press, whole cluster, so very gentle process where we're just extracting the fruit flavors and not a lot of the tannins. So the finish and the body of the wine are really elegant. Wow, very crisp. This wine is really crisp. It has a tiny bit of minerality. What's minerality? That's like when you hose off your driveway after it's really been hot and you smell the pavement. You smell a wet stone. That's minerality. There's a little bit of that there, okay? A lot of acid to it, right? It's not this big, giant, lush bomb. It's got acid. So it's saying to me, caramel corn, please, or cheese, or pair me with some food and really take me somewhere. Help me go somewhere. Beautiful, beautiful fresh fruit. So when we start getting into our reserve collection, we're talking about intensity and fruit quality. And when you can really taste that preserved lemon, it's like the lemon that's off your grandmother's lemon tree. It's that lemon that you smell in your hands after you go to the farmer's market. It's like lemon zest is so pure, and that's sort of the signal that this is in our reserve collection, along with a really nice, elegant mouthfeel, which is fermented in barrel, as we talked about, and aged in barrel. So aged on those lees, and that creaminess and richness contributes along with the lemon tree. You guys are so funny. Along with that really beautiful fruit and the acidity. And why is the acidity there? It's there because it's a cool growing region which retains its acidity. Okay, so even with malolactic, you get this acidity. So a really beautiful, beautiful wine, very similar to white Burgundy, which is Chardonnay in Burgundy region of France. And you can really tell that it's cool climate from the acidity. So if people are like, well, I don't like Chardonnay, but I like really like high acid wines, and they start naming off, you know, some wines like Sauvignon Blanc or even Pinot Grigio to a certain extent. Well, hold on, let's try this Chardonnay, okay? Because you might like it. It's really pure, it's really beautiful, and it has got a really nice acidity to it. It's dry, very dry. Beautiful. So what other kind of pairings can we do with these wines in the fall during Drink Pink, especially as you guys are hosting and doing different events? We've got caramel corn. I like all kinds of like squash or persimmons that are in season, the little orange persimmons. I like, those are really easy little fruits to chop up and pair with the wine. Apple pie, or little sliced up apple pies or apple pockets. Great for Thanksgiving. All these wines are beautiful for your Thanksgiving table because you've got the beautiful richness from all the baking spices. I like these wines with anything that has sort of that pumpkin spice blend where you've got the cinnamon and the nutmeg and all those yummy seasonal flavors. So these are great wines for the season. There's just really no limit. I like them with pumpkin pie, like I said, apple pie, pear pie, galettes, puddings. You can do all kinds of really fun things with these wines. Tonight I'm cooking a squash. I'm going to do squash with butter and maybe a little bit of sage and have that with the Chardonnay. So wide range. I know that Trader Joe's and some stores offer like pumpkin ravioli. That would be super fun. Maybe even with like an Alfredo sauce. So you're kind of pairing that creaminess, or you're complementing the creaminess with the acidity of our Carnero Chardonnay. So tons of really fun things going on. And as we look through our descriptors and just kind of wrap these descriptors up, you see the banana and the toasted coconut, the baked apple and pear, some pineapple, vanilla, and the influence of the barrel, which really is the heart of this white wine tasting compared to our Sauvignon Blanc tasting, which sees very little oak. So when you talk about Chardonnay, a lot of times you're talking about how much oak and for how long, and is there malolactic? And you guys know everything about malolactic. All right, so let's go over our glossary of key terms that we learned tonight. First of all, aging. Aging is the time spent allowing wine tannins to develop and resulting in full and complex yet supple wines. Okay, so that's a process that we do with a lot of our reserve reds, a lot of our wines, but that's something to go back and remember. The aging process is part of winemaking. Lees. Okay, there it is. It's spelled out for everybody who is taking notes. We've got the remains of the yeast that settled at the bottom of the fermentation vessel. Their second job from converting sugar to alcohol is now to add creaminess and volume to the wine. And surlies, there's that beautiful French term that's super confusing until someone tells you what it means, which is aging on the lees. So when you're barrel fermenting and you're aging on the lees, that's surlies. You can sound super fancy with your wine glass and your pinky out. Surlies. Right? Okay, malolactic. This is one you guys have got tonight. Malolactic is that secondary fermentation resulting in reduction of acid and butter-like notes. So when we've got our acid ninja in there and he eats that acid, and he also has that byproduct, which is now the buttery component in wine. Buttery. When someone says they want buttery wine or they're looking for butter, that's that character that's used to describe Chardonnay produced with malolactic fermentation. So now you know. Carneros. This is our reserve appellation. It's a cool region in southern Napa Valley and also includes parts of Sonoma County. So it is Napa and Sonoma shared appellation. We source our grapes from Napa Valley portion. Chardonnay. This is a white grape varietal originating from France. And white Burgundy, we talked about this. This is the white wine classically made from Chardonnay grapes in Burgundy, France. Now, for extra points, I want to ask, what other region in France grows Chardonnay? I know you guys know. I know you know, because we've talked about it. Somebody remembers. I'm going to give you some time. Okay, because I want to do our cause partner spotlight. So, Champagne. Oh, look at you guys. Look go. Oh my goodness. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, that's right. Champagne grows Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, right? And Pinot Meunier. Those are classic champagne grapes. Awesome job, everybody. Way to go. So we've got our cause partners spotlighted. Of course, with our California Chardonnay, we spotlight our breast cancer clinical trials, so important. And we've been able to provide so many of those. I might have Jake chime in on that partner. And then with our awesome Carneros Chardonnay, we've got helping end childhood bullying. This is another one that really goes close to my heart. It's really an issue in a lot of schools, and a lot of kids are affected. And that little face is exactly what these little faces look like when they've been treated in that way. And it's really a problem in our schools. And I'm really excited that we're helping contribute toward the end of that for a lot of people and doing amazing things. Jake, did you want to add anything? Sorry. No, he's good.
Just that the trials, we work with Gateway for Cancer Research, and we've also historically funded mammograms, which changed quite a few years back, but we have funded thousands of mammograms as well for early prevention. And so all of it is good, but I wanted to touch on what you were talking about as far as who our cancer organization is. And then childhood bullying in the past, and they're awesome. If you haven't, if you're unaware of what they do, Google them, or there's information on our site with the go to the rainbow bottle, or you go to this bottle, you can find out more information.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So any other questions in the chat box after we've completed this tasting? I'm happy to answer. I also want to remind you guys to send your wine questions to email address wine@viaonehope.com. I do my best to take a look at those questions each week and bring you some answers in our Q&A every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Facebook Live. And let's see, we've got a couple questions. How do we decide where we source our grapes from for the California wines, the non-AVA specific wines? Well, we source from the very best regions throughout California. So for California Chardonnay, that's going to be in Monterey. It's going to be Arroyo Seco. It's going to be like South Central Valley, where we can get some really beautiful flavors contributing to Chardonnay. And Chardonnay grows throughout California. So we're really lucky that we have a lot of different sources where we can find Chardonnay to make this type of wine, which is very ripe and rich and beautiful and not overly acidic. It's got that really nice supple volume and really just enjoyable to drink. It's beautiful because it's from so many different places throughout California. How would I describe the difference between the core Carneros, Elway, and Joseph Jewell? Well, in a quick nutshell, this is what I would say. The core Chardonnay is more tropical. It's got coconut-like oak contribution. So it's got some oak, not super buttery, but a real tropical fruit to it. Beautiful wine, very elegant and simple, and also creamy. It's got some creaminess there too. Our Carneros Chardonnay is from Carneros. It's got high acidity, complex, very intense lemon flavors, and a little bit more complexity from that lees. So almost a little bit of that brioche character. It's just a little bit more. It's a little bit more individual, is what I would say. It's really unique and specific to that region with a lot of lemon, which is great for food and wine pairing too. The Elway is very similar. We do source that from Carneros, but Elway has a little bit more oak contribution to it. So where we keep ours to be like very on point with the fruit and accentuating that lemon and letting that fruit shine, Elway is going to have a little bit more oak contribution to it. So you're going to see a little more oak in Elway. And then if I compare that to Joseph Jewell. Joseph Jewell is, again, probably like Jake was saying, you know, maybe the most buttery. It's very full-bodied. It's probably the most full-bodied Chardonnay that we have. And it's got a lot of that aged on Sour-Lees character. So that was aged a little bit longer in the barrel and really kind of has a lot of that richness and complexity. Also sourced from Russian River, which is known for Chardonnay as well. Beautiful Chardonnay that ripens. The type of clone is different, so the type of grape that's grown is different. You're going to get a lot of really complex flavors from Joseph Jewell in that barrel fermentation. So thank you guys, and let me see. Do you go and taste the grapes at different locations we source our grapes from in order to make the correct tasting notes for our California Chard? I do taste the grapes from a lot of different locations, and really I make all the tasting notes once the wine is pulled together and we have a look at the blend, because there's a lot of winemaking that goes and is involved in our California wines to really make them taste consistent every year and deliver exceptional quality from a lot of different vineyards. And as you can imagine, some years aren't the best for one region and they're better for another region. And so we work with all those different areas to source and be very consistent and make the best wine. And everybody likes them for different reasons. Is Elway the most acidic? Oh, that's interesting. I think the most acid would be in the Carneros. For me personally, but they're really similar. That Carneros appellation, you start to understand what that appellation delivers when you start tasting these wines, and you know that there's that beautiful lemon and also that beautiful, beautiful acidity. So, anyway, if there's any more questions,
I love the acidity in our Carneros, Mari. It's actually one of the, I think, defining things. The highest quality white wines have great acidity, and some of them can capture great complexity without, sometimes masking with head and deep shards. If you try our Carneros Chardonnay, I think it's like a true old world style Chardonnay and kind of traditional fills what Chardonnay is used to. One of the other wines that we have that is actually surprisingly buttery for being a Sauvignon Blanc base is Fumé Blanc. And I wouldn't call it buttery, but it definitely got more of a full mouth, viscous, kind of rounded shape to it than you get definitely from a normally crisp Sauv Blanc. And so that one's a fun one to kind of get a feel for. And I would add, also to the person's question, I think it might have been Lori's, about the grapes and some of the consistencies on these California wines, as opposed to a super complex and driven by one small estate or a small production type wine. When you start getting into more available wines like we do, obviously you're not sourcing from 2 acres of grapes or a little boutique pick. And so to make this wine the flavor profile and its consistency, in a lot of ways, I think it has to do with the winemaking style and matching profiles and working the collection of grapes, because you're sourcing from multiple vineyards for these. A lot of ways, I think making that kind of a wine and a wine that scales to tens of thousands of cases, maybe a 1 million case brand like the Robert Mondavis of the world, and some of the people who have made the most famous, biggest brands, they are masters of that winemaking to work with that, versus from everything I know from talking to winemakers about the highest end wines, much of it is dictated by the best grapes in the world. And we certainly select a lot of great grapes, and California has amazing ones in general. But when you get to the scale of wines to create that kind of consistency, it comes down to Mari picking the best grapes available. But what's nice is we're not married to a single vineyard that year. If there's drought or, God forbid, there's a fire or something like that, it goes beyond the scale of a specific state vineyard or even beyond. So it allows source from all of California. And it's an important statement to make because most people don't realize that only 4% of America's grapes come out of Napa Valley. It's a very, very special place because of that, because 4% of the grapes that come out of it drive 29% of the sales revenue in the wine industry, which is a wild thing to think about. Over 7 times the volume percentage to the actual piece of the market that is. But at the time, I'm certainly not a snob about Napa. I know that there's places in Sonoma, the Central Coast, even into the Central Valley and up to Lodi and places like Mendocino that are starting to grow grapes that are competitive with ours. I think we see high prices of Napa because of the beauty and the aesthetic, and certainly our terroir is second to none. It might be tied with a lot of other people, but it's second to none. And so certainly there's something to that, but a lot of it's also driven by the lore and the mystique that comes with the area and the beauty that comes with this area. So it is important to note that, because we sell 90% of our wine, we sell over 90% is that core collection. And we turn out beautiful core collection wines, and we're able to do that because we have the flexibility to source from one of the best growing states in the whole world. Found the best full region in the whole world is California as far as sourcing grapes, if I might say so myself. And I thought that was a good thing to share with you guys, and somewhat timely, obviously, because a lot of people have questions about the impact of the Napa Valley will have on the industry. Also worth noting that 95% of our grapes from this vintage ended up getting harvested this year, and it may end up being like 97 to 98%, how much of it's impacted with smoke taint. And hopefully we see the same thing come out of Sonoma. But those are just a little extra tidbit on, because there's some wines from Sonoma and Napa too that once in a while will blend into different core collections and other wines of ours in the portfolio.
Awesome. Thanks for adding that, Jake. That's so great. So great to have Jake on tonight. And I wanted to circle back to what he said about our Fumé Blanc and go back to this white winemaking photo picture here, infographic, where we talk about that barrel influence. And so that sur-lees, having the wine in barrel on the lees really makes a big difference. And that's where you're going to see the results in our Fumé Blanc, which is fermented in barrel and on the lees, and adds that richness, complexity, and mouthfeel that we talked about when the acid ninja, also known as malolactic, takes the acid away. And we don't do that in Sauvignon Blanc. We don't do that. So where does it come from? It comes from the barrel, the lees, that aging process. So really important to note, and a really great comparison with our wines. So that is perfect. This has been amazing, you guys. It's just what we all needed, was to get back here and get to normal. Everyone in our towns is saying, let's just get to normal. And this has become normal for me to see you guys here once a month and talk about wine and uncork change. And it means a lot to me to have all of you guys here tonight. It was really fun to have special guest Jake on the line and see a lot of your parties. We're really encouraging you to use this opportunity as a sip and share event as we go from the grape to glass on our varieties each month at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. So next month, we've got November 14th, Tuesday, and the topic is You Had Me at Merlot and Malbec. Oh yeah, boom. Just like that, we are gonna rock this holiday season by introducing one of these reds in our international collection that I think you guys have been just like dying for. And it's gonna be super fun, and it's gonna be a way to really introduce something special. So we're gonna be here next month. Any other questions? I'm there on Tuesday for Q&A. You guys have a great night. I love seeing you. Drink responsibly and join me next month. Bye.